for the intro. Yeah, we always do. Yeah, we always do something new. It's the R&B podcast. You know how we do. And today we are going to have our first guest. And she's probably going to be the best. Let's have a toast for my wifey. Let's have a toast for the podcast. Let's have a toast for Russ and Blake.
I love that.
All right, everybody. Let's have a toast for our first guest on R&B podcast with Russ and Blake, featuring the one and only Mrs. Maddie Jones. Round of applause. Yay.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So this is the first day of Rhythm and Blessings, our guest series. And we took a week off last week. We did a little experiment, and we'll save what the experiment was. It wasn't ready to be published or posted, but that we got another treat for y'all in addition to our guest series, and we figured the best guest to have to get started with would be my wife, because it seems like we've had a lot of positive feedback when we've discussed love and relationships. Very important for everybody. So why not give you all an insight to that of which I experience on a daily basis? Russ, give a little intro for these folks.
Yeah, once again, Maddie, thank you for coming.
Of
We
course.
feel so blessed to have you here. Like I've told Blake and many other people know, you're one of my favorite people to talk to.
Thank you,
whenever
Russ.
we have like little parties, or we've had times in history where we get to just have conversations. You're a great conversationalist, so we're excited to have you. Maddie, like a little bit about yourself. Where were you born?
I was born in Peoria, Illinois, moved to Peoria, Arizona in 2004 with my mom, my brother, and my sister. So it's just been us four out here since then.
Okay. And what kind of do you think Peoria, Illinois, is there any type of impression that it has on you? Do you kind of say that some part of Peoria made you who you are? There's something about it that you really still love?
I don't know if specifically Peoria, Illinois made me who I am, or if it's just my childhood and my background. There was a lot going on in Peoria, Illinois that my mom escaped us from. So I think that whole journey of just leaving that behind and then coming here to Arizona and creating a whole new life for ourselves really made me who I am.
So a lot of strength from mom.
Oh, 100%.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she's my biggest role model. She, if it was not for her, I would be totally in a different position in my life.
That's great. Shout out to your mom.
Shout out to my mom. Mom,
Shout out
shout
to
out to you because I know
Grandma.
you're listening.
Yeah. So, me and Maddie come from different childhood backgrounds, but we've both reflected upon those backgrounds together, and that has aided us in kind of making a plan or a vision for what we want our family to look like, because we both had pros and cons just as anybody does in their childhood. And I think early on, as we were starting to get to know each other, there are probably some things that I didn't understand that she had gone through, and even vice versa. But that's why communication has been so important for us in developing our relationship, and really could be considered the single most important piece of a relationship, I think, because just if you really want to establish love and you want to have a trusting environment and you want to be positive and happy, then you have to be able to communicate those things and make sure that you're on the same page with your partner. So I say all these things, and I think the people listening hear my perspective, but from your childhood, babe, and then moving on to kind of the college years when we met, what do you think was really significant in you transitioning from being a kid to being a young adult around the time that I came into your life?
Early on in our relationship, and this is something that we were different on a lot, is I thought there had to be conflict in a relationship, whereas you were like, there shouldn't be conflict at all. So I think really in the beginning of our relationship, we had to find that good mutual ground.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I was always looking for what the next conflict was going to be, and that created a lot of issues. So, and that's stemming from my childhood, because there was a lot of conflict in my childhood between my mom and my dad. So I grew up watching just conflict in a relationship consistently. So once I learned that I want you to be happy just as much as I want happiness for myself, I think that's where I got out of the mindset of looking for that next conflict. And you also taught me that we can go, months and months without having any conflict. There doesn't have to be conflict for there to be love at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We can always love each other without conflict. So I think that's something that I learned very early on in our relationship, and that has really been the base of our relationship from here on out.
But I also had to meet you halfway because when there is that much passion that we've talked about before, there has to be balance, but occasionally the scale will tip and we're not perfect, and people say things that they might not really mean, and there just has to be forgiveness, and there has to be explanation and communication after the fact. And so it's not realistic to never have conflict, right? That's what we learned. And so I was thankful for you helping me realize that because, I've seen conflict with my parents too, and it was probably different than yours, but my idea was like, okay, I like my parents' relationship, but if you take that out, then it'd be perfect, right? But it's really just about how you address and how you resolve those conflicts, and then how far you let them escalate also.
Right.
We try not to raise our voice with each other, and we try to let each other speak. And sometimes I'm ready to answer and she'll let me know, like, hey, I'm not done. I'm like, okay, okay, I'll listen. And so I've always thought I was a good listener, but Maddie has definitely let me realize there's room for improvement there as well. So we just do what we can to try to build upon one another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with Maddie and myself, we growing up probably saw arguments and discord not get handled the best way, communication styles. Do you feel like when you were coming up, you saw some more high intense arguments get settled in a very right, loving way?
Well, what was interesting for me, like my parents, in a kind of good and bad way, wouldn't really let me see a lot of conflict. So like I would know there's some type of, I guess, argument going on, but they would take away and have that conversation, or let it kind of be paused until I wasn't there present. And so that again is part of the reason why I thought like, oh, there shouldn't be any conflict, because I only saw so much, even though sometimes I would know like there's something going on that needed to be resolved. So the, I guess, problem for me was I didn't always see what the actual resolution was. Like I knew something was up, and I knew eventually it got resolved, but I didn't know what that process was really like. So at one point I thought it's just not supposed to happen, right? And then so for me, actually going through that final process of kind of closing everything up and getting that the closure was something that me and Maddie got to, I guess, explore together.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't, I had been in relationships before, but not long enough relationships to even get a chance to deal with some of the, I guess, roadblocks that you have in a relationship that we come up on, because it was the first at least a full year, I want to say 2, that was like, oh man, this girl's perfect. We never argue, and she's still perfect, but we do argue sometimes. We have disagreements just because we're different people, different human beings that have brought our lives together, and so there's this joint venture, right? But we're still individuals too, and that was also something I think we had to work on, is maintain our individuality. As we, our love grew for each other, and we love spending time with each other. And yes, we would love for each other to be involved in everything we do, but it is healthy to have some of that time or activity that doesn't involve each other, and still maintaining your other relationships also.
Yeah, and I think that was the biggest turning point for me in our relationship, when I realized we don't have to do everything together, and just because I'm not happy doesn't mean you need to be not happy. And once I realized that I need to make you happy just as much as I expect to make myself happy, that's when I really realized that, okay, these are the things I need to do to really focus on this relationship. And it was when you tried to break up with me, he tried to break up with me, everybody. And that's when I really kicked myself in the butt and was like, hey, I am making him unhappy. Why am I making him unhappy, and how can I fix that? He needs to be just as happy as me in this relationship. And I wasn't focused on that in the beginning until it got to the point where I was going to lose you. So thank you for that, because I might never have changed if you didn't really, force me into that situation. So now I'm grateful for that looking back.
Yeah. And then through that, we still prioritized communication. It wasn't like I just closed the door and never looked back. And I knew it's something that I wanted us to be able to work on. And like in processing that, I kind of came up with other excuses of like, oh, well, like I only have this much time in college left. Like, what if I'm missing out on something? And then, after a day or two, when we were like taking a break or whatever, I realized I'm like, no, that's not it. Like, it's been 24 hours and I'm sitting here like, what am I doing? Like, I know who should be here with me right now. And I'm trying to kind of rationalize in other ways, but really all it needs to happen is we need to communicate on what we need from each other a little bit better.
Yeah. And I think that's why you guys are so inspirational, because it's like you're answering this call to work on yourselves and finding the utility in each other that's bringing it out of you. And that's awesome. It goes so much deeper than just a physical attraction or, oh, this person's really ambitious. It's I'm working on myself through this person and with my communion with them.
Right, yeah. And if I'm happy and Blake's not happy, we're not going to be happy together. So we really had to work on that in the beginning. I did, at least.
Bro. And I know a lot of people that know you guys in your friend group come from families that have been broken up, have come from seeing all those arguments, and almost see you guys as like an example, like their example. A lot of people won't say, no, I've never seen it work. I stopped saying that. No, you guys don't know Blake and Maddie.
Yeah, I mean, I never saw it work.
Right.
I can't think of a lot of successful marriages just off the top of my head. And I think that's a big motivation for me, is to make my marriage work, especially for our baby.
Yeah, especially for a baby. Yeah, so whole new motivation to it now.
Yeah.
And we've been so grateful for that blessing, and also grateful that we already had this desire to build a healthy relationship, and we both know that we want to start a family, and we knew that that would start with us being positive and loving towards each other, and just developing these healthy qualities that we can teach our daughter also. So I've been really proud of Maddie, just because I know what growth I want, and it took me to realize that I have to prioritize her growth also, and then being able to see the process of her growing and kind of look back at the beginning of our relationship to where we are now. Yeah, of course, we bicker a little more than we did when we were 20, but it's we make sure that it's resolved, and then we make sure that it provides us with something, because there's a reason that tension happens. So once you resolve it, it's almost like making a mistake. You just want to learn from it and not let the same thing occur again. So once you have more goals within your journey and see kind of growth around you, rather than you yourself growing as a tree, and you're kind of seeing this forest create, and then we're all able to provide each other with shade and nutrients in that way, just like we do in nature. And just have an appreciation for certain things that I know I would overlook and take for granted if Maddie wasn't there to point it out to me or help me slow down a little bit, because she knows I have very ambitious goals, and sometimes it sounds crazy how many things I want to accomplish. And so I'm like moving quick, because I'm like, no, I know I can do it. Like, I just have a finite amount of time, so I got to get moving. But, sometimes after things happen, we help each other take a pause and appreciate things, because she's the same way, ambitious, especially recently, professionally. And we just remind each other to be proud of where we've grown to, and also understand that the journey has just started.
Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's why people have to be very not just cautious, but intentional when they are trying to find a partner, because they'll say, oh, my time is being given to this person. I don't have enough time to chase my dreams. What you just articulated is like spreading out, building the ecosystem, building more people that can help you. And now you've like tripled your time, quadrupled it, because you have people that actually love and have intent to help you grow. And when you guys met, you both were young scholars. What were you studying at NAU, Maddie?
Criminal justice with minors in social work and ethnic studies.
True. So when you guys met, you both kind of had the approach that you wanted to go out into the world and work with people.
Yep. Make a difference somehow.
Yeah, that was definitely a way we connected. Because early on, I could tell she was a nurturer and she was loving and kind and empathetic. And I was like, oh, these are all like motherly qualities to me, right? And so that was something that early on I knew was how I wanted to pick my partner, like who's going to be able to be the mother and the wife that I know that I want and deserve. And so... and she was very honest too, and so it was easy to see those qualities early on, just because I could see the communication wouldn't be a big problem between us, just because of how she shared her experiences and her emotions with me.
Yeah, and I had to do a lot of work on that too, though, because in the beginning of our relationship, I was very closed off emotionally, and when we had a problem, I didn't want to talk to you about it. I wanted to run away. But you really helped me open up and learn to express my feelings in a healthy way.
I think that's part of the reason I thought things were just perfect, because if there was an issue, Maddie didn't really want to address it.
Right.
But then she realized that you can't let things bottle up, and then I realized like the only way to address problems is to talk about it and not act like there are no problems.
Yeah.
So.
But that was another middle ground we had to reach, because I got to the point where, okay, I'll talk to you about it, but I need, a couple of hours just to process my thoughts before I approached you. Because right now I might be a little crazy. So just let me sit for a couple of hours and process, and then we can come together and talk.
I'm still working on that too, because I'm like, okay, I know there's a problem, let's fix it now. But that's not always realistic, because it's good. You want to make sure you present yourself properly to your partner.
Right.
Same way you would in business, I like to feel like I'm the CEO of my family. So when we have these meetings to address issues and find solutions, I want to make sure that I address the necessary topics and try to do it in a respectful manner.
Yeah, and it's amazing because like your co-CEO here, Maddie, is saying she has the self-awareness to be able to say, hey, I might be kind of crazy right now. Let me use this time to chill before I approach my problem. How do you feel like you develop that level of self-awareness? I think that's something people have to work on, or maybe your family or something. Like, how do you think you developed that?
I developed it because I think I was letting a lot of things boil over to like our next argument. There would be something that we argued about or something that upset me, and I didn't bring it up to Blake because I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to have to deal with it. So the next time I was upset with him, it came out, and things were just piling up and piling up. So then I had to step back and be like, okay, this is not healthy. We need to address this problem before we can move on to the next one. And I think that's been one of the best things for our relationship.
Yeah, that's like an accountability mirror.
Yeah.
Like usually people have to learn how to put that mirror up.
Right.
Like, wow, I look crazy right now.
Yeah.
I don't look like my best self.
Yeah. And there would be times where we would have an issue and I would handle it in a totally not healthy way at all, and then the next day I would be very upset and I would feel very bad, and then I would go back to Blake and be like, I'm sorry for how I handled that, and I didn't want to go through that anymore. I didn't want to put him through that anymore. So yeah, I really had to reevaluate how I handled conflict.
But also acknowledging it yourself and then apologizing for it, and then we forgive each other. And I think taking accountability is really important in relationships, because we could always point fingers at each other, right?
Yeah.
And just let things continue on. But things, bad, I guess, interactions or emotions end a lot quicker when someone says like, okay, that's my fault. I'm sorry. And some people don't want to even do that. And that's like the shortest intervention you could do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I think we do a good job when we have conflict. We talk about it, we both listen, and we solve it right then and there. It doesn't seep over to the next day or the next conflict or anything.
Yeah, because y'all have Mila now.
Right.
It's like you can't have that energy festering around the home when you got a soul growing up in it.
Yeah. And I mean, I know we're talking about conflict a lot, but we really don't have a lot. We don't argue a lot. We might bicker, but it never turns into an argument. And I think we're very intentional about that.
Yeah.
We don't want to argue, and we don't want tension in our house like that.
So when you were studying criminal justice at the time, Maddie, like what was your idea of what you wanted to do with that, and what were some of your passions at the time that were around that?
There was two really different sides to my criminal justice desires. One side was crime scene and forensics. I was obsessed with watching true crime shows, and I even volunteered with the medical examiner for a couple of months, like in the autopsy room. So that was like the exciting side to me. And then there's a personal side to me, where I have a brother that's in prison. So that was really my personal driving force, wanting to go into criminal justice, wanting to make that change, really just kind of trying to figure out how we could work with people that are incarcerated, innocent people that are incarcerated, actually, and helping them get out of prison. But I really realized that the social work field is really that preventative field. I want to be in the field that prevents people from getting into incarceration. Really, when you work in the criminal justice field, it's that just maintaining the people that are already in prison, and I wanted to intervene before they even got incarcerated. So that's really why I jumped into social work right out of college.
Yeah, that's real. So when you were working with the medical examiner, so you were day to day seeing like dead bodies, they were doing the autopsy. Was that hard to get used to, or from the beginning were you like, wow, this is the thing I was watching on TV and this is exciting?
I mean, it's a little diabolical to say, but it didn't affect me like that unless there were like the little kids that I saw. But other than that, like, I thought it was exciting. It didn't really affect me mentally or emotionally, where some people were like, that's gross, how could you do that? But I mean, I loved it. It was really one of my dreams to be behind the scenes like that, seeing that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I was like, she would tell me stories, and I was like, whoa, that sounds traumatizing. I was already seeing stuff that was crazy. I was like, you might have me beat here, baby.
Yeah, and there was a guy that was in the medical examiner getting his autopsy done. That was one of your patients, actually.
With HIPAA being maintained, the injuries that he received were pretty specific. And then so I had explained that to Maddie, and then we were sharing stories, and I was like, oh, that's very familiar. I think that's my guy. So that was a very interesting experience. I don't know if that's ever happened with anybody. Like somebody taking care of a patient who we knew was going to pass away, but then you being in the medical examiner's office dealing with that same person, and then us coming to our home and having that interaction was something that I thought about for a while. And I think it did get to you a little bit after a while.
It did, and that's why I quit. And thinking about, because it was a Saturday morning, every Saturday I had to get up at 6 a.m. and go and do that till about like 1 p.m. And after a few months of doing that, I was like, is this really how I want to immediately get up on a Saturday and go and do this kind of work and then come home to my life like nothing has happened? And it really was, starting to take an effect on me in that way. And I realized that's just not how I want to live out my weekend, because I was working Monday through Friday still, 8 to 5, and I only had these few days on the weekend, and I really didn't want to continue to use my weekend seeing those kind of things.
Yeah.
And you didn't feel inclined to spend the rest of your life doing that either.
I don't think I could have done that for the rest of my. It was fun for one day a week for a few months, but I don't think I could have done that for the rest of my life.
And that was kind of a conclusion I've been coming to in the hospital too, is like you see these graphic things and you either have to build up this tolerance or I guess be desensitized if you're going to survive in that environment for a long period of time. And, you would kind of explain to me some of the conversations and interactions people would be having while they're examining these bodies. Right. And I was like, oh God, that's like, it sounds gross to me. But then at the same time in the hospital setting, I have to clean up bodies and put them in body bags. And a lot of times during those situations, it's a similar thing, just having normal conversations, like what are you going to have for dinner tonight type thing. And it's a little disturbing to me. And it was something that was hard for me to ignore. And I had to ignore it because it was happening regularly. And I saw that was how other people coped with that experience and put themselves in a situation where they could continue to do it. But just me being an empath and thinking about things and people the way I do is really hard for me to like block out what that person just experienced, what the reality of what this is going on in front of me. Because you really do have to kind of take a objective scientific approach when you're looking at those scenes and dealing with carcasses,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, it felt like being in a whole different world. Like
It
when you
is.
step into the medical examiner's office, it felt like a whole different world than when I stepped out and life was still moving normally. But to be in there, you're with all these dead bodies, and then you have families that their loved one had just passed away. So yeah, it was it was taking a toll on me after a while.
And even those people, I'm sure, would admit being in the examining room and seeing a decomposing body
Yeah.
is a lot different than you walking your dog and coming across a decomposing body, right?
Right,
So
yeah.
the setting is a different world, essentially.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, if someone were to come across with their walking their dog, come across a dead body, that would be very traumatizing for them. That's one thing I've always thought about with Maddie and you, Blake, is that since you guys have experience, even though you don't want to stay there for your whole life, you went and experienced like the mortality of the human being and the realness of the fact that like we're not about to live forever. And you know, that's one reason why I love philosophy, because I think philosophy puts into words like our mortality, and it makes people really like think about that. But to just go straight to the horse's mouth, so to speak, and look at real life. I think you guys have such a gem in your perspective now from going through that.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, to think about these people were just out doing normal daily things, like out on the lake in a boat or driving a car, and just to really sit back and think your life could end at any second. So just be grateful and be aware of that always.
Yep.
Yeah, and then we remind each other of that. You know, we say we don't have much conflict, but if we do, it's like, oh, is this really worth it? Like, you know, is this how we want to spend this day? And like, what do we need to do to expedite this process so we can just get back to our scheduled programming of being that nice, normal, happy family, right? But everybody's gonna have those difficult days, either individually or as a group, whether it's your family or you and your friends or extended family. Like there's no just linear progression of happiness or contentness or I guess a calmness. We all have stressors and we all have to deal with things that are unfavorable, and it's just about how you're going to deal with them and move forward. So, you know, we have all been to college. We went to the same college. We all have college degrees. Russ, for you, do you think that your college experience influenced how you go about trying to seek a partner?
That's a good question. I don't know. I really love the field of psychology. I really love history. I love how they come together. When I meet people, I do like to have deeper conversations about some of the things that I perceive, and I always hope that there's like a refreshing perspective that is given back to me. I don't necessarily think you need to go to college to have that. I actually think a lot of my studies outside of school made me kind of almost debate what I learned in college and almost go backwards. So I don't necessarily think so, but I do think one not requirement, but thing I do like is like a studious person, like someone who might do that research on their own and develop their own perspectives. Because in our day and age, dude, a lot of people have the same perspective on stuff because they're getting their information from the same source.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Yep. And that's kind of what I was looking for you to say when you said that.
Sure.
Having that person that is also inquisitive and studious and curious. And, you know, I think meeting Maddie in a college environment, you know, we were both free spirits at the time, like to have a good time, but we were also there to learn and we had interests. And so that was something that attracted me to her. And then, you know, as time goes on, she's very proactive about gaining knowledge and things that she's interested in, and a girl that's okay with picking up a book and, you know, watching a nonfiction YouTube video that's not just for not just for entertainment, rather.
Or makeup.
Or makeup tutorial, yeah.
You'll never find me watching a makeup tutorial.
Right. Because we all natural with this beauty over here, right? Yeah. But that's definitely something that I can relate to, and being able to have certain conversations that you can't just have with a girl you run into at a bar, right? So I don't think that that's for everyone to have that level of stimulation, especially from your partner, because not only are some people not interested in having that type of conversation with the person that they love, but some people don't really have the capacity for it, which I think is okay, because we just all go about that process so much differently. But when you find someone that has a similar drive and a similar approach, and just how you're going to gather your knowledge and how you're going to process information and the time that you're going to put into gaining new information, I think that's very beneficial. And it's good to have the differences too, because, you know, I'm like into the financial markets and the economy, and I'll be telling Maddie about this stuff. I'm like, babe, you got to read this. Like, did you know about this? And she's like, I'm gonna let you handle that. Yeah. Like, I'm glad you know, but I'm not too interested. But it's okay, because we have areas where it overlaps too. So again, having the joint venture and then your individual as well. I think that's great. And
yeah, and you know, one thing I was thinking about as you're saying this, when we all have traumas in our past, every single person, and some people just kind of want to be entertained through their time, so then they don't have to delve too deep into those dark parts of themselves. And you guys have already spoke about how you kind of forced each other to go into those dark places, and reminding yourself of the home possibly in Peoria and how conflict was running things, and you're now coming out of that, and reminding you of how you might have been kind of shielded from some of the more difficult sides and how you're going to grow out of that. I think that just the approach of wanting to be that aware is what makes that difference between like the person who's inclined to maybe study and the person who just kind of wants to be entertained through the evening. Like, I'll be entertained till I go to sleep, and I'll wake up and keep my system going. You know?
Yeah, that's a good point. So, you know, with that being said, I don't think there's any wrong way to live life, right?
No.
I get the person that just wants to be entertained and just wants to have fun and not know about the negative aspects of the world.
And we have periods of that too.
Yeah. And it's intentional, right? Because me, there's stuff that I'm interested daily, because these things are always changing. But I also like tell myself, you know, maybe I don't need to update myself on the market today. Like, I could probably skip out on a day and just focus on what's here in the present and with me.
Yeah, because I think we've came to the realization where you digging a little bit too deeply into the negative on what's going on financially or socially, politically, it has taken a little bit of a negative effect on you and your mindset going throughout the day. So I think sometimes it's better for you to just sit and focus on what's going on in your own home for a little bit rather than in the whole outside world.
Yeah. And it comes with balance, because I definitely went through a time where I didn't pay attention to the world news at all. But, you know, as we try to build professionally and financially, I feel like those are just things that I have to be aware of and need to educate myself on. But you have to have a plan with what you're going to do with that awareness, right? You can't let it consume you or instill fear or change your direction, really, as far as like what the objective is behind gaining that awareness. So again, thank you, wife, for pointing that out to me.
That's interesting. So, Maddie, how do you feel if you're ever in like a group of women, or if you just hear the sentiments echoed of like man hating, and they're like, oh, like men ain't, you know, ish, and all these different things? Like, what's your perspective if you're in a group like that?
It's so funny that you asked that, because we kind of talked about this before, and Blake was like, you need to give me a shout out and tell, you know, the audience that not all men are bad.
Yeah.
Which is true. But, I mean, it's so different for me, because I used to be in that mindset before I met Blake, because my father, I have a very different perspective of my father. I think about him in a very different way than I do my husband, than I do my brother. So, I mean, ladies, there are great men out there. There are great husbands out there. And no matter what all your other past experiences are like with men, you're going to come across that one man or that multiple men that show you men are different and men can be different. And there are great men out there that really just want to provide. They want to provide. They want to be emotionally supportive, mentally supportive. And I found all of that in Blake. So, and it doesn't go to show that in my last relationships. Like, this relationship is way different than any other relationship I've been in. But I never gave up. I knew that there was going to be that great men out there. And I'm sitting before two of you because two of you are great men, and I would pick Russ to date any one of my friends or any one of my family members. So I truly believe that men have the ability to be amazing human beings, and they are. Yeah.
But you definitely have friends who think otherwise.
Oh,
right?
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I do have a lot of friends that they don't date men. They have no interest in men. They date women, but they still are men haters. And yeah.
No, I've had conversations with that same kind of person, and with us, like we have friends who are guys that be like, "Oh, women are just trying to do this and all these different things." And you know, one thing about you, Maddie, is you don't really have a social media presence much.
No.
And has that been like since you were in college and high school, or did you cut everything out one day?
In college, I had more of a presence than I do now, but it was really one of those things that I didn't like how it made me feel mentally, and it wasn't doing anything good for me mentally. So I really just had to reevaluate why I was on social media, what was I getting out of it, and did it really need to be in my life? And I just came to the conclusion that it was adding no good to my life. I wasn't productive when I was on it, so I really don't like it anymore. So yeah, I don't see, for myself, I see no good use for it.
And then so like us, we use it for a lot of business interactions and to get exposure. And we also have personal pages, so it is hard to balance the time consumption sometimes, right? Because they're right, it's one click of a button if you're gonna do some business stuff or be on it for your personal pleasure. So, you know, I feel like if somebody doesn't have a business purpose of being on social media, then it's almost impossible to like keep that under control.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, sometimes we feel disconnected from other people for not being so involved in TikTok and stuff like that because it gets referenced to us so frequently. And but it's never anything that's that significant you're missing out on.
And I honestly didn't like how other people's lives were perceived on social media, that they were perfect, and nobody shows the bad on social media. So I didn't like going on social media and seeing how perfect everybody else's lives looked, and maybe mine wasn't feeling that way at the time. So I was comparing, myself to what I saw on social media, and that was doing no good for me. So
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say there's different points of the spectrum on that as well, because we know people that post their whole lives on social media, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly, and then there is the people that only post the good, and then there's some people it seems like they only post the bad, right?
Yeah.
And then so me personally, I don't really post my problems on the web because I feel like I just need to handle them, and I'm not looking for consolation from other people or really that kind of emotional support that it seems like some people are looking for when they post things on social media. And actually I had a conversation with one of my cousins recently that we've always lived 1,000 miles away from each other. So, you know, our connection is pretty loose, but he had this perception of what my life is like, which I love my life. I think my life is perfect for me, but there's definitely, I guess, flaws in me as a person and my life, I guess you could say. But just how he was telling me that my life is perfect and how he's telling me that I have this perfect image. And I told him, I was like, I'm sorry if that's what I'm portraying. Like, I'm confident with what I'm doing, and I have confidence to overcome the boundaries or the obstacles that I'm faced with, and I have a very strong, beautiful partner who's going to help me get through those things as well. And I'm proud of myself for how far I've gotten. But at the same time, like, I don't want anybody to think I'm perfect. I don't want anybody to think that my life is perfect, because that would be a lie. And if it was perfect, I really wouldn't have as much to work for and to be looking forward to anyway. You know, so I know the potential of what my life can be, and I know that I have so much that so many people would die for, and that's why I portray happiness, because I am happy. I know that much.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Have you ever thought about that perspective of it, to where people on social media just don't want to broadcast their issues?
I mean, yeah, and that's okay. Those are people that's privacy. Nobody needs to know the issues you're going through. I mean, yeah, and I guess it's your social media. You do with it what you want to do with it, and you show what you want to show. Yeah, so I mean, that's fine too. There's a spectrum to it all.
I guess my question is, what would be your advice to someone who wants to be involved in social media and also doesn't want to start comparing themselves? Because I think you've done better with that. For a while, you
Yeah.
cut it off, and then you realize, like, oh, I can be involved and still have this awareness,
Yeah.
right?
I think everything's about intention, right? What's your intention with your social media? What is your intention behind what you want people to think of you? And what's the intention behind what you want to portray yourself as? So as long as you have those intentions set and you're living out those intentions, I don't think, I think the comparison will slowly start to fade. Once you feel good with yourself and what you're doing and what you're using social media as, I think it'll really, that you'll start to, feel like less of a need to compare yourself with other people.
Are you saying that self-love?
It's the best love.
Oh, man. That's crazy, ain't it?
Yeah. You know, I'm wondering, Maddie, when you were coming up, did you used to see your mom like reading books, or was she doing studies and whatnot when you were younger?
Not from what I could remember, but my mom has always been very smart to me.
Right.
She has a lot of knowledge. She didn't go to college. I didn't see her really reading a lot, but I think those were also her circumstances. For a lot of the times, she was a single mom. She was working full time, and she had 3 little kids to take care of. So I don't think she had that time.
Right.
But and I'm a first gen college student, so I think that's something that I go back on, and I'm like, I wish one of my parents would have helped guide me a little bit more in my college days, just to guide me to choose a degree that like had a set path coming out of college. Because criminal justice, I'm like, well, what can I do with this now unless I want to go get my master's? But although I didn't see my mom read, she didn't go to college, she still is one of the smartest people that I know.
Right. And that's why I asked, because I know your mom's perspective is great. You know, she understands a lot of stuff, history of all types of things.
Yeah.
So,
And she's taught herself a lot since I've been older. I think she wasn't able to do that when she had 3 young kids, but now that we're all grown, I think she's done a lot more self-educating than she ever has.
yeah, it's amazing for me to just think of these timelines, like to think about the Peoria, Illinois setting all the way to now Mila being able to inherit this great knowledge and experiences that you guys have. It's mind-blowing how these things are connected.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're telling me when I was living in Peoria, Illinois, what is college? I don't know what college is. I don't know what a bachelor's degree is. And I feel like really I taught myself a lot too, just based on my life experiences and watching my mom go through some life experiences and just realizing what I don't want my life to be like and what I do want my life to be like.
Yeah, and like you said, a timeline. And I think as time goes on, people ask us questions as a married couple, like, oh, what's the secret? And then sometimes I'll think like, oh, we just got married, I don't have secrets. But I'm like, oh, I guess we're over 3 years now, and that's longer than the vast majority of marriages last.
Right.
So that in itself is a feat. And then we really don't have any perception of the time that we have not yet experienced, right?
Right.
So we're all sitting here 27 and 26. So we don't know what it's like to go through 50 years of anything. And so we can make goals for where we want to be in 50 years, but to really have an understanding of that, you got to go through it first. So, it's hard to put things in perspective in that way, because you do want to make plans for the future, and you want to make sure that you're always making decisions that are going to put you in a better place in 10 years than you'll be in now.
Yeah.
But none of us have the perfect, equation or map on how to get to that point. So having someone alongside you to collaborate with that has also gone through 26 years of experience, all of a sudden it's almost like you can double the time of experience that you have, as long as you're communicating and collaborating.
Yeah.
And then, as you have a better understanding of what the future can hold because of how valuable time really is and what can change in such a short amount of time, I think that sets yourself up for a lot more potential success in whatever it is you're trying to do. So I've appreciated that, because I've always been this kind of go mentality, just because even in high school and our school age years in general, having 4 years of high school, 4 years of college, and then now 4 years after college, I'm married and having a kid. And then it's like, ooh, these each 4 year increments, I feel like I have to have like a really big event happen.
Yeah.
And then sometimes we've noticed we'll get a little anxious if we don't feel like that momentum continues. But now, if we take a step back and look, we've only been out of college for 4 years and we've already done this much. So if we're just a little patient in this phase, if we let it at least go 10 years, I guarantee something within that gap is going to get filled in, and it's going to be brought to light on how much accomplishment is truly happening in this period of time, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And all this daily self-growth you guys have going on is like a mile marker in itself. You know, so I'm wondering, I remember driving down, I was driving down the freeway, right? It was, I guess, almost like a year and a half ago now. But I was driving down the freeway and Blake calls me. This is when he was travel nursing. Blake calls me and he's like, dude, like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm driving right now. He's like, you might want to pull over. I was like, what's going on? And then he tells me like, dude, like Maddie's pregnant. Like I'm about to have a baby. And I just remember pulling over like, what? That's crazy. Like I was just so excited, so many emotions. So like take me through that, because were you out of town when you found out?
Yep.
Yeah.
He was in Oklahoma 2 weeks to his travel nurse assignment. I called him. We did the test together on FaceTime. He was at the gym. I think he was going to pass out when I told him it was positive.
Made me anxious thinking about that. I was like, oh man, what is going on?
But now looking back on that, I wish I allowed myself to live in that moment a little bit more and really take in what that meant for us. I think we were both just so shocked, and we were living on an adrenaline at that time. So I really wish I would have, just lived in that moment a little bit more, really took it in and processed how our life is going to change from here on out.
And there's a lot of mixed emotions since we found out, and we were hundreds of miles away from each other at the time, right?
Yeah.
So we were excited and nervous and a little bit sad that we weren't together, and a little bit confused, and just probably a little bit of everything. And so I think it would have been different if, I was there when it happened, of course. And I had a lot of, I guess, fluctuating emotions because of that. And because I had just started this 3-month commitment of being away from my wife. And now I have this 3-month commitment of being away from my wife and my baby. And so it was already difficult having that distance. And then so that made it even more so a little bit difficult. But it ended up being one of those things that kind of tested us in our relationship, I feel, and made us stronger after the fact for having to go through it that way.
Yeah.
Because also, your mom had COVID at the time.
I don't think so.
Or because you were like by yourself.
Is that why I FaceTimed her and I didn't go in person to talk to her? Maybe that was it.
I don't think anybody could like give you a hug and congratulate you for a few days, right? And so that was a big thing for me. I was like, man, I really feel like I've left her alone.
Yeah.
And this was not my intention of going on this venture of abandoning my family. Like I'm trying to provide. So
I mean, I think that taught us a lot of lessons, but the biggest lesson that I took out of that, because we weren't planning it. We had so many other things that we were planning. We were such perfect planners, and we thought this was going to happen at the perfect time that we wanted it to happen, and then boom, it just happened. So I think I learned that we cannot plan everything in our lives, and it's all in God's timing. So really, God has the final say. So, and he really showed us that.
Yeah.
Man. And your guys' whole story has been just like God's divine grace. I love watching it. I always tell people, like, we went to Las Vegas for Blake's bachelor party, and then a week later we're in Tucson for your guys' wedding, and then like 5 days later the world closes down due to COVID.
Right.
Literally 5 days later, everything, you can't go outside, you can't go to the store, you can't. None of that period would have happened if it was just 2 weeks earlier.
Right.
You know.
And I mean, God continues to speak very loudly to us. And if I'm not listening, he pulls out the megaphone. And so you got to just listen to these signs and listen to your instinct and trust yourself, because God's within us, right? And sometimes those messages we receive, we don't really interpret them properly. But me being gone, because I went on a traveling assignment to make more money. That's simply the reason why I did that. And so us getting that news while I was out doing that kind of made me take a step back and realize, I didn't get into nursing for the money. And then so maybe me taking a specific job for the money wasn't the right thing for me to be doing in that situation. And maybe me sacrificing the time I get to spend with my wife to make more money was not the thing that I should be doing, because like we said, you don't know when life's going to end, right? So me taking a 3-month stretch just for a monetary return, that's a pretty big risk if you're thinking about it, I guess, honestly,
Yeah.
So I had a lot of time to reflect, because here we are 2 weeks into my 3-month commitment, still got 2.5 months left. I ended up only staying there like, I think 75% of the time that was planned, which was really good. But at the same time, we both had to kind of push through a darker period than we would have expected in general. But especially with us having such great positive news, here we are trying to kind of cope with our situation as we figure out how we're going to alter our plan moving forward. So again, just the communication that was required, and the empathy for me to understand what she's going through as a woman, because I knew as a nurse all the changes that come with becoming pregnant and how that process is in general, regardless of what situation you're in. So I just knew that me as Blake, as a husband and future father, I've really felt a burning responsibility to be there to support her while that was going on too. And again, it was just one of those things that did make us grow. And then even her birthing process was not that smooth. And so that was another opportunity for us to push through some adversity together, and for us to come out of it with such a big blessing and, be able to see another day. I think we were both so grateful for where we are now, and just being able to actually appreciate these things that are happening to us, regardless of how pretty the picture may have been while it's going on, right?
Yeah, I think it's just so interesting, because you talk about how early on in your school career, you're like, I want to help these people, but it actually works better if I go into a preventative field. Same with Blake. He's in the position where he wants to help people be healthy, but he'd rather get to them before they've gotten all the way to the hospital.
Right.
And I mean, we've talked about this on past episodes, but it's always just so crazy to me, because like what you guys have built and what you guys are doing is like the antidote to the whole thing. The antidote to all the incarceration statistics and the living unhealthy all the way till you get to the hospital and all these things. You guys are combating it with just your love and your dedication to your home. I just always want to point that out, because it's like inspirational to so many young people, because sometimes we see this huge system and we're just so like, it looks like a big monster.
Yeah.
But it's like you can use love to cut through it.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be so confusing,
Yep.
So that was more of just a
100%.
statement that you guys
Thank
are
you, guys.
inspirational in
Thank
multiple
you.
ways,
Appreciate it.
and the antidote to the whole system being, what some people are upset with.
Thank you.
Just out here trying to lead by example and learn one step at a time, right?
Yep.
Right. So Maddie, one of our episodes we were talking about love languages, and Blake, brought up that they need to be one like communicated language that is all one thing. Do you feel like you know Blake's love language, and do you feel like he knows yours?
Yes, yeah. And it's funny because I read the book, The 5 Love Languages. Blake did not want to read it. I mean, I didn't think he really believed in the love language. But yeah, I think I know his for sure. And I think he knows mine. And to your point, what's your point of why you don't really necessarily think there's one love language to satisfy?
I just feel like it's limiting.
Okay.
Like if I was really gonna put categories to love, then there'd be like 100. But being able to just look at love for what it is and how it is, I think that there may be a preferred language, such as
because you have one love language that you expect me to do the most, and that would help you feel the most love,
Which
and that's
is
physical touch.
Yeah, because I like getting kisses and hugs.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that helps you feel the most loved by me.
But I also like words of affirmation. When you tell me I love you, I'm like, oh.
So that's your second. So they can be on a spectrum. It doesn't have to be one love language conquers all. There's
Well,
a
that's
spectrum.
the thing. They're all on a spectrum of love.
Oh, okay.
But you wouldn't want to trade the touch for the words. You would definitely
No.
much rather the kisses.
Well,
right?
Yeah,
I don't
no.
know if she just give me kisses all the time and I never heard that. She loved
Like, what do
me.
these kisses mean?
But
I
yeah,
feel that.
it's all perspective, right? It's just, I guess, a preference for me, just because I feel like, yes, I want to give you hugs and kisses, and I want to tell you I love you, and I want to give you presents, and I want to do this and that and this, and I think that it's my responsibility to do all of those things. But I guess what I need to change is what is it that you want from me,
Yeah.
and what is the best way to show you that I love you, and that's the purpose of the love language, right?
Yes, but it's also to love the person in the way that makes them feel the most love.
Right.
Like ours are different. So I have to cater to what your love language is so you feel how much I love you in the way that's most effective for you and vice versa.
How do you say it? The acts of service, is that the one?
Good
So
job.
yeah,
Yep.
me performing tasks. One thing I like to do when Maddie's at work and I'm watching the baby, I'm like, okay, I want to straighten up the house a little bit. I want it to not look chaotic when she walks through the door. You know, try to get the dishes put away, make the bed, like little simple things that I know will make her feel a little more relaxed when she gets home.
Yeah.
She likes when I cook. She does most of the cooking, so when I do cook, she likes that. She's appreciative, and but I definitely see her enjoy all the other love languages too.
Of course.
But yeah, that's definitely something that I had to learn. Then like, okay, I need to pick it up a little bit so
Yeah.
that she understands how much I love her.
Yep.
Because I remember at some point saying that, like, I just want you to understand how much I love you.
Yeah.
I was like, well, show me my love language, right?
Yep.
And now you guys get to learn what Mila, how she's going to want to be
Oh, yeah.
shown love.
I think it's
yeah.
physical touch
I
right
think
now.
so.
She's
Yeah.
very clingy, but
Pick me up,
yeah.
hug me, kiss me.
Yeah. Russ, I feel like yours is quality time. Is it? What is your love
I
language?
do like quality time for sure. And what do you see as that for me? Like, does that mean like we go do something together, go on like a trip or something? What is quality time?
Just spending, you can be in a room sitting silent together,
Oh.
but just being together and spending time together.
Yeah.
Because I feel like you just like to sit and have conversations and just talk. So
True.
that's why I see quality time.
Yeah, and that is huge. I
Yeah.
do like to just sit and talk, and the world gives us so much to talk about. If you're just sitting there, it's like you're going to be given something, and
Yeah.
then you guys are going to go on some tangent and all these types of things, and yeah. you know.
And you'll need somebody that will allow you to read, right? So it's like, hey, you can be in the room reading with me. Like,
Yep.
I hope you have some material too, then you're interested in this activity.
Yep.
Yeah.
But if you met somebody that checked all these boxes and they're like, oh, why would you read a book?
Yeah.
I could see that being a red flag for you.
Sure, because right now I think one of my biggest tools in the competitive fields that I'm in is that I spend like kind of a sick amount of time studying and just like reviewing film and going over little nuances. And I used to think, oh, if I'm in a committed relationship, I'm not going to have my same time above my opponents that I'm kind of competing against to
Right.
study and come up with the things I need to be great, but that's not true. It's
Yeah.
really not, because I know somebody who's a basketball official, and they were telling me the other day, like, oh, my wife went to Kinko's or whatever and printed me out this whole manual of things I need to study, and she highlighted these different areas. And I was sitting there thinking, like, man, we have it so backwards. Some people think that it's going to take away when it can enhance so
Yep.
much. Like, if the right person is with you, dedicated to your dreams, you
Yep.
can go so far.
Yeah, most of the people that I respect the most for what they've done in business and honestly in athletics a lot of times too are people that have been in committed relationships and had families that they have to balance as well. And it's I think kind of like you said, a backwards expectation, like, oh, I have to give my time to someone else and do all these other things instead of that work. But once you find somebody that supports you in what you want to do and that is excited to see you succeed, then everything actually ends up becoming a lot easier.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And we all have insecurities, you know. You guys, when you're in a relationship for a long time, the person knows you, like the bare you, exposed you.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? When you get to know somebody at first, it's weird, especially the older we get, because there's like more insecurities, more time,
Yeah.
more distrust,
More
right?
substance. There's more to learn.
Yeah.
Right?
And then there's that. There is more to learn and show like real unconditional love towards.
Yeah.
I never really thought about that until I just said that out loud, though, because, you know, you meet your high school sweetheart, you guys only have your childhood years to kind of understand of each other. But if you meet somebody in your 40s, they've experienced so much. Like, there's a lot that you need to try to understand and be empathetic towards. And when people haven't even attempted at kind of exhibiting those qualities of being empathetic before, and now they're like, okay, my career is established and I want to start a family, and then you start trying to understand people in a romantic way that's going to give them the opportunity to be vulnerable, but also feel like you're not judging them. I think that's a little bit difficult if you haven't really been practicing those things over time as you build upon your experiences and kind of become more and more of a unique individual, right?
Yeah. And Russ, speaking on like what you were talking about with insecurities, in the beginning of our relationship, I was a very insecure person, not just for myself, but in our relationship. Like, I was doing all the sneaky things to try to catch something that Blake was doing, which I never really found.
Yeah.
But just through this 7 years of being together and really knowing that I can trust Blake, and him showing me in every way that I need that I can trust him, has really helped me become a way more secure person individually and with our relationship. In the beginning of our relationship, I was always expecting something to go wrong, and, oh, he's doing this and this and this behind my back. But each time he's really proved that I have nothing to worry about, and there's really nothing that I'm going to find when I'm looking. So really just the 7 years that we've been together and the type of man that Blake is has allowed me to be a way more secure person individually and in our relationship.
Yeah, especially when we met, because I was kind of a loose cannon a little bit as far as like how I interacted with people, because I was very eager and friendly, and so I had to learn, like, if you are going to be in a serious relationship, you can have friends that are girls, but there's definitely a certain way you need to be interacting with them. You know, there's probably certain times you should be interacting with, like, don't be up texting some other girl at 11 p.m.
Yeah.
Even if it's a innocent conversation. Like, those are ways that you show respect towards your partner. And some of that stuff I didn't understand early on, just think, oh, it's my friend, I've known this person for this long, like, why is that a big deal? But again, it's with communication, and you have to understand that those lines can be blurred, and somebody else might have a different agenda for their interactions with you as well.
Oh, yeah.
So you just have to make sure that your boundaries are appropriate and your boundaries are strong, and they're boundaries that your partner is comfortable with as well.
Yeah, I mean, and I was bringing my past relationship experiences into our relationship, and that's why I was expecting so many bad things to happen. So once I let that go, and I realized really every new relationship is different, every man is different, and it doesn't always have to be bad. Once I let myself realize that a relationship can be good and positive, that's when I really just allowed our relationship to flourish, I think, too.
And if you want somebody to act differently than your previous relationship, you have to give them an opportunity.
Well,
to
and
be
I
that
had to
different
act
person,
differently,
right?
too. I couldn't be the same person that I was in my old
Right.
relationships that failed. I had to show up different.
That's real.
Yeah.
That's real, yeah. And I mean, we all can reminisce back to young Blake, 19, 20 years old, just super ambitious. Everyone likes him. He's like I've said on this podcast before, he's like the popular dude that a lot of young guys want to be like. And it's funny because they don't see it the way he sees it, where it's like, well, eventually you actually need to humble yourself all the way down, which you helped him do. You helped him go from, he labels it loose cannon, just being out there, ambitious and great, but he had to humble himself to be able to actually be great and tap into what he really has.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I'm
that's
glad you
just
put it
awesome.
that way. That's a good way to put that, definitely. Because I've kind of struggled with, like, I feel like a way different person, but at the same time, I know I'm the same person because I see these similarities, like being that person in high school that's leading like pep assemblies and being homecoming royalty and stuff like that. But then I went through like college phase where I was like almost ramping it up a little too high. And then I pulled it back really hard where I was almost like a recluse for a little bit, and then finding that balance between. But then at the end of the day, I'm the same me. But
Just in a different way.
Yeah, and I operate so much differently, but I know that my character is the same. And that's one thing I just gotta pat myself on the back, because I've grown so much, and I'm proud of me the same way that I'm proud of my wife and how she's grown. But we don't lose ourselves in that growth, and we make sure we hold on to all those positive qualities while we try to fine tune the not so positive ones, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And we don't expect each other to be perfect, and we're excited that there's so much potential for growth between us.
Yep.
And now that we have a little baby to watch, like the physical growth, I think we also understand how important it is for us to continue to grow, for her sake as well. And we're just really starting this journey with our right foot forward, I think.
Yeah.
And it's been definitely a huge learning experience every day in ways you can't imagine.
That's great. You know, I always like to think about like our history of America. I feel like you could take you guys and how your perspective is and put yourself in like any century that America has been. You guys could go to 1923, 1823, 1723, and you have the recipe to like combat whatever was going on outside of the home.
Wow.
No matter how much hate there would have been, right? Like you guys have that like archetypal recipe to combat the whatever it is that was bad outside, you know?
The only thing I would say, the people, our ancestors that were in those periods, if you take that away and put us there, it is a little bit different of a situation, right? Because I know like my grandparents and my great grandparents and what they accomplished, and I guess the struggles that they went through have definitely set me up for success and put me at this point. So I hear what you're saying. Maybe if I was in their shoes, I'd be able to accomplish the same thing. But at the same time, it's like how I am now and where I am now just has to be attributed to the people that came before me as well.
Yeah,
and
for
it's
sure.
just that this mindset with these resources, I think, are perfect in this setting. And it scares me to think of being in a different century, because we talk about, you know, civil rights and all that and how much better things should be. But a lot of people don't acknowledge how awful things used to be. And then I do question for myself, like having this positive, I guess, mentality while we combat some of the negative. There are a lot of negative things that we will never have to face, and that we don't even know the gravity of what it was going through those, right?
Right.
And so I just always take so much, I guess, appreciation into my day when I notice these things that are basically luxuries that we have in our society in comparison to how things were, you know, a few generations ago.
Yeah.
And there might not have been as I guess, light of an approach, even if we were still positive. It may have been like a little more of that fighting spirit moving forward, you know, rather than having that kind of pacifist and unity. There's just different types of division that you got to go through at certain stages of time, right?
Yeah. I hear you. It's interesting to me to think like Mila could watch this in 2050. You know, like this could be something she streams up in like 2050 and taps into, and it's like, oh, what?
Yeah.
Let me see what they're talking about.
We just have to see which platforms are still around. That's why we post on all of them: Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, Anchor, wherever you want to find us. Google Podcasts. Yes, sir. We are there for you, and we're there to stay as long as those platforms survive, because we know we're going to survive. We got a long journey that we're starting up here. So
Yes, sir.
I think that.
And let me just say, also, we invested in ourselves, so we will own this audio and video file. You know what I mean? This is our stuff. We bought all this. So.
Big deal there as well, the ownership. So, I think this has been such a blessing. Talking with a couple of my favorite people, my favorite person, and, you know, top 5 over here. This conversation, I think, has just been a little, I guess, taste, a sprinkle of what will come, because y'all know we got to have wifey on here more than once. Like, we just getting started with that. But to kick off our guest series in this way, such a big blessing, and I hope it excites all of our listeners, because I'm still excited, sweating a little bit in these pics, having my pretty lady over here doing this with us, just because it has been such an enlightening experience. And like I said, we're just getting started.
Yep. Thank you for having me. It's been so much fun, and I'm honored to be you guys' first guest. You are two very just important men in my life, and I learn from you a lot and look up to you a lot, and I'm so proud with what you're going to do with this podcast.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you, baby. Thank you.
Yep.
And any closing remark?
No, just thank you, Maddie. Thank you, God, for getting us here. You know, everything. I just feel inspired just like you. I have nothing else to say.
I figured. Cool. R&B podcast. Thursdays. We're back. We missed last Thursday. We're not going to miss another Thursday. I don't care what happens.
Yes.
I don't care what happens. Let us know, please, feedback, because we want to continue to grow this community and continue to grow this product that we're giving to you guys. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, whatever platform you are on. I listen to them all. I won't listen to them again. But that will help us out tremendously. And if you've made it to this point at the end, you must like it, right? So go ahead and let somebody else like it, and make sure you push that button down there. And we'll see you next week.
Peace.